But when we're looking at who that self is and growing that, and that evolves every year in one way or another, that's endless novelty.
Mhm.
And that in a relationship where there's also that security because we are choosing each other. Even after all the shit we've been through, at the end of this, we chose each other. And that's some powerful stuff. That's some security and some safety that is reestablished. And we have a formula for ongoing novelty.
Hello, everybody. I am here with Jackie Pack. Jackie, we are about to give everybody the truth. I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm a realist. I've always been a realist. I don't want people to sugarcoat anything. Present it to me in a way that I can buy in, but at the same time, don't sugarcoat it. Like if it's hard, let me know how hard it's going to be. If a lot of people struggle and fail, let me know that so that I can try extra hard. I think, with my audience being high achievers, executives, entrepreneurs, business owners, hard's not something that they shy away from. I think, for my population, we don't need you to convince me to stay. Like I screwed this up. I want to fix this. I don't want to be a guy who does these things. So just tell me if it's going to be hard. Tell me how it's going to be hard. If it's going to be complicated, tell me it's going to be complicated. If it's going to be expensive, tell me it's going to be expensive. Like, I just want to know all of these things so I can make a plan, and I can know if I am trying as hard. An opportunity to say your spin on what I just said. Do you navigate this? Where's that line between scaring people away and also being honest with them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person, I tend to be pretty direct. I tend to be pretty upfront. Even if I think I'm tiptoeing around things, people will be like, "Whoa, that was really direct." And I'm like, "Oh man, I was trying to tiptoe." Like I was trying to come in soft and not that I'm not soft, but I can sometimes just be very direct and not realize that. So I tend to be pretty honest with people who are starting this process, that it is a long process. It can be expensive. The short term fix your sex addiction in 30 days, like that's just not even going to get you started, I think. And there is a lot of work that is involved in this, but I think it can also be exciting. So when we say, yes, it's a long-term process, Dr. Carnes's research says 3 to 5 years. Also, his research was with people mostly in residential treatment center. And I don't work in residential treatment centers. So, it might be a little bit longer because they are out and about and living their life. And that, they're not protected in a residential setting. So it is going to take a long time. I usually say it shouldn't take that long to get sober. And then we enter the recovery phase, which is exciting and transforming. And that's usually, if they're in a relationship, that's usually when their partner starts to get excited about the work they're doing. That's when they start to be like interested and maybe wanting to be more a part of this, instead of feeling like I'm here because of something this person did to hurt me, not because I need to be here. They usually start to engage a little bit more at that point, willingly and in an excited way.
Yeah. So let's talk. Oh gosh, it's a dreaded topic, but I think you and I injecting truth into it will make it easier for the listeners to hear. But of course, the dreaded topic of timeline, right? Everybody wants. It's frustrating to be in limbo, so everybody wants to know, hey, when is this going to end? Now, Jackie and I are not going to give you a timeline because there is no such thing. But I would like to speak to it from a just what to expect standpoint. So let's first talk about the let's rewind all the way back to when this happens, right? Sobriety. I want to inject some truth into this because I do think when we call this addiction, which I actually really don't like that term, because I actually don't think a lot of the guys are addicted to sex, to boobs and vaginas and nudity. And like, I don't really think they're addicted to these things. And so I think the problem with calling it that is there is this unconscious almost expectation of, oh, it's an addiction. I have seen that
Mhm.
on movies and TV. He's good. We need to ship him off. He'll go to this place for 4 weeks and he'll come out and he'll be healthy. And very similar to a How to Quit Porn in 30 Days book, How to Quit Porn in 30 Days, even if you're living in a facility, if you know the psychology behind why this is happening, we can't undo this in 30 days. It's not, I mean, Rob Wise admits, he's the founder of Seeking Integrity, and he admits this right on his podcast. He says, if you think you're going to come here and leave and never act out again, that is absolutely not true. It tees you up for a successful recovery. But I wanted to speak to, I'll inject my truth into it, and then I'd love to hear yours. Jackie, I call it a spectrum. I mean, when you look at because for the listeners who don't know this, although all my listeners know this, sex addiction is a process addiction. So if you guys really want to understand this, look into process addiction, which we actually, we don't have a lot of data for sex addiction because it's very new and it's limited. We actually have a lot of data on process addictions, eating disorders. Like if you guys want to understand how to treat a sex addiction, look into anorexia, bulimia, I like directing guys that direction rather than gambling, just because gambling's not a life-sustaining function, whereas sex and food are. So if you really want to understand this, there's actually a good amount of research done on eating disorders, and I would say it's a similar approach. So, but it's a spectrum. And if you look at how the American Psychological Association defines it, recovering from a process addiction is a slow and steady decrease in the thoughts and the behavior, right? So I know no one wants to hear this. Your wife wants it to be a switch that you flip and then you're magically sober. But the truth is, when we come to process addiction, changing the brain processes is it's a process. And so you will gradually move down the sober spectrum closer to the sober end from the addicted end. The thing is, though, you're living life every day at some point along that spectrum. And so the challenge is in those first 6 months, the truth is, your husband, or if for the guys listening to this, you're going to work or on that work trip still more on the addict side of the sober spectrum. And that's the truth. Like I'm not, anybody who's going to sugarcoat it besides that. Like you are probably more addicted than sober going on this trip. Right. And you're really relying on guilt and grief to keep you sober. And it does a pretty good job for those first 8 months. That wears off, though. Jackie, how would you speak to guys and wives listening? Because I'm having more and more wives listening to my podcast. How would you speak to sobriety so that people kind of have a very realistic understanding of it as a couple?
Yeah, I would agree that there is a continuum, and even understanding whatever we're dealing with, the compulsive sexual behavior, right? There's different understanding. Somebody that starts working on this has a level of understanding. They know that it's hurt their wife. They know they might be able to determine a couple of ways that it's hurting them, but sometimes they're only seeing that it's hurting the partner and not themselves. Or they might know that this doesn't really align with my values, but is it really harmful? Those types of conversations. And we have to work with the fact that sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And so as we move down that sober continuum, they're going to have a deeper understanding and be able to circle back and put things in their 3 circles, or put things in there, how they define relapse, or add things to the slip circle, just as a way to understand. I think sometimes making it concrete instead of abstract. As we're moving down that continuum, they need to, put that, I will always say, putting it in the concrete, which is writing it down, puts it on the radar.
Yeah, I like that. It's what you said too, which was my next talking point, is recovery. Being that this is a process addiction, and the reason I like to call it that and not a sex and porn addiction is the behavior that you're chasing might not, shoot from our in-house research, which is not official. I haven't, but we collect it from, it's only 18% of guys who actually identify with doing this as an addiction or an escape. The bulk of the guys in my program, one of the biggest driving factors is something that they gain. So this could be validation, this could be attention, admiration, right? So it's not an escape, it's more of a means, right? And I think the other challenge too, Jackie, is A lot of people look at this and they look at these guys like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy did this. What a monster. What a sicko. It's interesting that that's people's response, because I'm like, I don't know. To me, it makes a ton of sense. Here's a guy, a successful, driven dude who has been watching action movies for his whole youth. Meanwhile, the character in these movies is not married. He is being lusted after and lusting after women in every movie and every episode over and over and over. The women are constantly being shown as this trophy to be achieved. And then your hero in the movie is, whether it be James Bond or whoever it is getting this trophy and conquering it. And I think we as a society are not, I think we want to blame these guys rather than James Bond, because we've all watched James Bond movies. And so we don't want that to be the problem, because we're like, well, it can't be the problem because I watched it and I'm not a sex addict. And so why would him watching it? But again, I think that's ignoring, especially my population, it's ignoring successful men and their desire to be influential as a young man. If I'm watching that when I'm 12 years old, it's the playbook that I'm about to execute on for the rest of my life. And I think, so to bring this back to my initial question, I don't know if guys are recovering from what they need to recover from. And I think that's why we see the relapse rate a lot higher than it should be, is even though these guys are trying their hardest to quit a sex and porn addiction, I think that's the problem. I think they're trying to not do sex and porn, but I don't think that's really what the issue was. I think the issue was exactly what you said, Jackie. They are under the impression that this is what successful men do. And so it's their system's really not that alarmed. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to, I'm getting money. I'm buying the cars they want. I'm buying the outfits they want. I'm speaking in the way they want. And now I'm getting in trouble for something that I've been literally perfecting for the last 30 years. That is why I think we see issues with sobriety, is I don't know if they're recovering from the right thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I would say, I think two things in our society that we would say hold the most power are sex and money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, if a young boy is watching all of these action adventure movies and watching the hero of this show, they're usually, driving nice cars, they're dressing very nice, and they have a lot of women. We are literally showing them this is what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
My question would always be, like, if somebody came in and was saying this to me, I would say, what was going on with that 12-year-old that he didn't feel enough and was looking to this movie as a role model to make what feel better? Like, what was that speaking to? What was that resonating with? And why was that 12-year-old already not enough?
That, oh my gosh. So I want to highlight this because there's a lot of successful guys who actually came from pretty put together families. Guys, I want to highlight this, what Jackie said though. I had what everyone would call good parents. They loved me. We were poor, but they did whatever they could to, I had a car, an old crappy car, but I had a car to drive when I was 16. They tried so hard to give me a normal and a good life, despite our financial constraints that we had as a family. That all being said, there was a massive emphasis on get good grades, become successful, save your money, retire early, make financial, it was a very performance-based household. We were encouraged to get straight A's. My brother was valedictorian. He was an Eagle Scout. And a successful life, according to my parents, was how many successful things do you accomplish? How many impressive things? How many things that nobody else can accomplish can you accomplish? And that sounds like good, encouraging parents, right? Here they are wanting me to become successful. And so, hey, here's how to live a debt-free life. Hey, it's fine to have nice things, but buy them cash. Don't get buried in debt, showing off and buying stuff you can't afford, right? All these fine, one would say, oh, great advice. But if I look back now that I know about like what we're supposed to be taught as a human, never once were like, oh, I'm so happy you are you. And I will love you, whether you're a musician, a poet, whether you decide to move to Nicaragua and spend your life trying to clean water for one of the tribes or community. There was never any, hey, I love you for whatever you decide to do. It was, oh, hey, go become this. And that's trauma. I know people don't think that's trauma, but your parents putting a massive emphasis on you being accomplished and successful, I know America would say that that is good parenting. And I'm not saying it's bad parenting. I'm saying there's a lot of things that are being left out by that. So to answer your question, Jackie, what was happening to little Roland when that was happening? Yeah, I was being told that successful people are successful and looked at the way they are and respected because of the things they've accomplished. And that was what I was told. And I wasn't just told that by my parents, Jackie. I was told that by teachers, mentors. I was told that by other successful men. I mean, I had a retreat this weekend, and one of my clients, it was so sad. We were having this discussion, and he'd bought a yacht, a small yacht, and he was having his 8-year-old son drive it. And he was thinking he was being a good father. You know what he told his son? He said, "And why does daddy have this?" And he says, "Because he works hard." And he was so proud to tell his son that. And now he's crying in front of a group of men in my recovery groups that was what he shoved down his son's throat. Because now his son, fast forward, his son's 21. He's texting him and he says, "Dad, help teach me how to make more money," is what his son just texted him this. So my point of all of this is, if to your point, if we are being shown this is what success is, and you name it, and again, don't act like women are immune to this. 50 Shades of Grey was a book written for women, and it was basically saying this is a fantasy that women have. And what was he? A trust fund billionaire who drove around an Audi R8 and flew around in his helicopter and had a red room where he courted all of these women. So again, it's just, my point is, I think we need to stop being so appalled that this is occurring and really look at why this is occurring. Because I don't think men really want to be doing this. I think that they're being brainwashed into this. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for you mentioned that your family was poor. So the messages coming from your parents were, don't be like us.
Yes.
Which says something to a young boy or girl,
Yes.
whoever, I don't care the gender, right? It says something to them because we do see ourselves coming from our parents. And if they're telling us, don't be like me, that gets confusing at pretty young ages. And it turns into some beliefs about self. But also, if parents are extremely wealthy and successful, kids are afraid of being less than. They set that bar at be like us, and kids are afraid to struggle. Kids are afraid at 21 to not be making enough money.
Yes.
And so either of those are going to get in the way of developing that authentic self.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, Jackie, now I see why I was referred to you. You're just a smart person. That is such a great thing to say. We are accidentally making them be afraid of being poor, making them afraid of not having their life not add up to anything, and so again, I know parents mean well by this, but what are you doing to that boy? He is now surfing, because that's what I did. By age 10, they were so focused on me performing and living a big life, which again, they thought they were being good parents. So did I, so did everyone. But you know what that caused me to do? I am constantly surveying who's the most impressive guy in the room and why. And what did our society show? He's usually super wealthy. So then what happened? I became friends with him. I became friends with all of his friends. And what would I find out? They aren't faithful a lot of the times. And part of their culture is, how many women can you sleep with? How many young women can you sleep with? How many married women can you get to cheat on their husbands? I mean, it's this, how do we prove that we've made it, right? Because once you've made it-ish, now there's not, you've bought all the stuff. Now the only thing to prove is, how do I keep proving this essentially to myself and my peers? How do I walk the walk? And if part of successful male culture is, well, how many women wish they could be with you instead of their husband? If that's the measure of success, which I know this sounds insane to some listeners, but guys, this has just kind of been running in successful male circles for, I would say, over 50 years. Right. And so when I say, what are you recovering from? That's what I mean is, like, do you really understand how this happened? And don't just listen to everybody in your 12-step meeting telling you that you're coping with negative emotions and you have an intimacy disorder. You might be doing those things, but don't just take their word for it. Really understand, how did this happen? Right? Because my own story, if I rewind to how this happened, I hated cheaters and I was never going to cheat ever, ever, ever. Now, I was a flirt. Don't get me wrong. I flirted since I was like 14, but I was like, no, I'm never going to cross that line, until I met these successful men and I knew their wives, I knew their families. And all of a sudden it's like, I remember the first year, I was just like, oh my gosh, I was so disappointed. Like, here's all my mentors and idols, and they all are cheaters. And, but it wasn't more than a year later before it was like, well, I guess this is just the way that it is. And next thing you know, I became one of them. And it's really sad. I'm filled with emotion saying that out loud, because here's this kid just trying to succeed. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to be somebody one day. And my mentors taught me how to become somebody that, and again, I can't blame them, because ultimately I went along with it. But, when you see your mentor saying, hey, this is what success looks like, and he's the most celebrated man in the industry, and everybody knows his name, and everybody's subscribed to his email list, and he's sending out 1.3 million emails, and he eats breakfast at Mar-a-Lago, and I'm supposed to not do as he does. I think that's the challenge that we're talking about. So I love how you articulated that, right? Teaching your kids not to be afraid of not having money, to be afraid of not having a relationship, to be afraid, now is all this scarcity, and what's that going to come down to? Yeah, I like that. So my next question here is, let's get into the truth of the relationship. This one, oh man, this is always dangerous territory, but we need to go here, because I think it needs to be said, because I think for a couple to thrive after this, I think they need to understand it's no joke. I mean, you're dealing with two complex, hurt humans who are going to be living in a reality they do not want to live in, and now they have to somehow stay married to each other. It's a big feat. So Jackie, when you're looking at this, here the elephant in the room is, and we all know this, we're asking the perpetrator and the victim to sleep in the same bed and stay married to each other, right? Which we never ask the perpetrator and the victim to do that, and we're asking them to do that.
I mean, I'm not always asking them to do that. Like,
right.
I usually say to the partner, what do you need to feel safe?
Yes, true. I love that.
And if that means he sleeps in one of the other rooms for a while, then can you agree to that? Does that make sense to you? And how do we try to keep some relational aspect in place?
I love that.
So we don't have to do that. Some couples, though, she would get more triggered if he was in the next room.
Right.
And so to me, I'm like, I'm not going to judge you, and you shouldn't judge yourself, but you have to find that answer to the question of what is going to make me feel safe right now.
I love that. And Jackie, you spoke to one of the 300. We're not going to speak about all of them today, because we'd be on a podcast until midnight, but you spoke to one of many aspects, which is, you got to watch out for your nervous system. I mean, it's yes, there's this stereotypical kind of way that people go about this, but to your point, if you are trapped in your own personal hell when he's not in the room by you, or sleeping on the floor in the room. I've had guys do that. They'll set up a air mattress next to the bed so that she knows where he is and what he's doing. But yeah, you bring up the point of kind of where I want to go with this is it's intricate and complex. I mean, you can't just tell a couple, hey, go do this. His acting out behavior is different. His past is different. How he was raised and his parents were different. The relational dynamic is different. How he got caught was different. Did he slip? And when he did slip, how were the slips discovered? I mean, all of these things present unique challenges. And that's kind of what I wanted to get into, Jackie. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds here, because this is like I said, we could do 60 podcasts on the complexities of each of these unique situations. That's not my point of this. My point is to speak psychologically to what couples are really going to need to do to get past this, because I think there's the magic, and this is what really annoys me about the space is there's this, if he learns empathy, then everything's gonna be okay. If he just gets sober, then blank. And again, I don't think these statements are really documented anywhere, because we all know they're not true, but they are thrown around a lot that, if he just got sober and learned some empathy, and he crawls down and learns how to be in the pain with you, that you guys are going to heal. And I am sorry, that is not true. You could learn how to empathize, whether you could crawl down in the hole with her, you could get sober, and you could do all of that in the first 3 months. And that is not a guarantee that you two are going to be in this thriving, connected relationship with great communication, that her nervous system's going to be calmed down. I mean, that's just completely not true at all. There's so many more aspects to that. Jackie, what do you say as I'm trying to expand people's understanding of hey, don't hang your hat on some of these things, because there actually is no data that proves you are going to be okay if he does get those things.
Yeah, I mean, some of that, like, why don't they have empathy? They probably disconnected from that years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they left that at 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. Or younger. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so when you were saying that you like to change it from what are you recovering from, I also like to say, what are we recovering?
Yeah.
What
I
are
like
we
that.
recovering here, right? And typically the answer is we're recovering the
Mm-hmm.
self that was lied to in the messages, the self that was told all of these things are what you do, and you feel some peace and contentment and satisfaction in your life, which isn't what they're feeling, because they're pursuing, thinking, okay, the next woman I sleep with is
Mm-hmm.
going to finally fill that hole that I'm trying to fill with money and with women and with things and with other men's perceptions of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's also part of what we are recovering.
Right.
And for both people, like the husband and the wife, they have to go through that recovery process. I don't know that our world, I don't know the world. Haven't lived in other countries. So let me just speak to our country. I don't know that we do a good job growing up individuals,
Yeah.
healthy individuals.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things would be different if that was our focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for both people, they're going to have to figure out how did I land here? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a well-timed place, a question for a partner to ask, like, why do you think, or what about your story explains why you ended up marrying a sex addict,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever we're calling it? What got you here?
Mm-hmm.
They have to figure out that, because if I don't ask the question, at some point they're going to ask themselves the
Mm-hmm.
question. So we also have to explore that question for partners. Um, the addict is having to make sense of, how did this come to be? How did I land up here? Because that was not what I was charting my path towards.
It's you're, and both part, I agree with you, because there's a growth edge there for both of us, right? I know exactly why I ended up here. I was raised in a performance-based household where that was what you did. Life was getting 1% better every day. And that is a very common message. Like you said, in this country, my daughter doesn't live in this country. She lives in another country. And um, as much as I wish I got to see her more, I am not that mad about her not being in this country,
Mm.
because down there, they're just, the energy is so different. It's they're not performance based. No one cares what you have or what you're going to have. They care about who you are today, what kind of friends you are. It's just a very different, there's other, every country kind of has their own little ways. I'm sure they have all their own little problems. But to your point, I got here through a series of beliefs. My wife married somebody with those beliefs, and that is always kind of interesting. Now, did she know that my belief set would create compulsive sexual behavior? No, she did not know that. If she knew that, she would not have gotten with me. But she got with somebody with my belief system, and she's done a ton of her work. Yeah, there's tons of codependency there. She was trained she was raised in a very religious house, right? So everything was always something outside of you. You are not important. It's God that's important. It's Jesus that's important. It's so it was always, you can't solve problems. Things outside of you are going to solve problems. And so she found me very attractive because I am a professional problem solver. I'm very good at solving problems I mean, honestly, when she met me, I had no problems. I built enough businesses to the point where I could kind of I could buy my way out of problems. And so to her, right, that was like, oh, wow, perfect. This was where I was supposed to land. So to your point, now here, her and I are on a whole separate journey, which kind of leads me to the next topic of discussion, which is what is recovery actually, right? And so I like that segue is, she should be asking, why would I get with someone like him, right? Because it shows her growth edge as well, right? So now her and I are both taking a step back, and we're like, okay, I've got my work to figure out, why have I latched onto these things, and why is it hard? Because I mean, I'll be completely transparent with you, Jackie. There are acting out brain pathways that I miss, man. I miss,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pissed I can't go get attention in that way. I loved it. It felt so great to get the spotlight on me in that way and have all these things said about me. And I am mad that I can't do that anymore. You know, obviously not my authentic self is mad. My egos in me are mad. But nonetheless, now we have had to take this step back, and I've had to say, okay, what beliefs do I want to believe? Because the ones that I was believing are not, I'm not proud of the legacy that I was living. But now she's having to ask herself a set of questions as well. And I think that's relational recovery. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think part of that, you know, I've worked with partners who are very successful women themselves, and they're very successful, they're very intelligent, they just can't figure out what happened in their marriage.
Yeah.
And so they're like, this is one area of my life that is a disaster and that I don't know what to do about. Other women, you know, they do marry into, because in a lot of these action movies, I mean, their focus is on the women in terms of obtaining them, not about who these women are as individuals, right?
Mhm.
And so we also find some of those women who are looking to marry well and not necessarily figure out who they are
Mhm.
and what do they want to pursue in their life. That gets missed a lot, especially in religious communities, because most in at least in patriarchal religions, we're not asking women who you are.
Mhm.
We're telling them the most important thing you can be is a wife and a mother.
Mhm.
And I mean, the truth is not all women are cut out to be moms, and not all women are going to get married.
Mhm.
And so they have to figure out, like, again, sometimes those things external are defining who they are or who
Mhm.
they should be, but that's an internal process. We can't
Mhm.
define that self externally, or we're always going to run into some problem that stops us, and we're like, okay. And I think sometimes that's where it's like, okay, well, what else can I
Mhm.
obtain? What else can I do to fix this, instead of going inward? Because I think
Mhm.
for a lot of people, the exciting work comes, but sometimes they're very scared of going inward.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you, especially for a lot of women, because men are, I think, encouraging men to become self-made is definitely more of a thing that we see happen for men.
Mhm,
It's definitely more on social media, and the self-made male is definitely, it's we're trying to catch up for lost time with women, and change that narrative, and we're doing a pretty good job,
mhm.
I think.
Yeah,
But
yes.
but we have hundreds and thousands of years to undo some of that, and especially kind of like you said, religious sects. Those communities. It's hanging on a little bit longer there just because of
Mhm,
how it's been written. Now they're not saying, oh, women are nothing. That's not what they're saying. It's just, the books are written as all the women being this nurturing motherly figure, right? And so
mhm.
they're not getting that message of, what are you? And I'm gonna somebody needs to get credit for this. I don't know who invented this, but I'm sure you've heard of it, Jackie. When guys are in my program, they're all kind of talking about how tough this is. It's because they really botched the system up when they did what they did. There's somebody who invented and again, I don't know who did it, but it was T's, A's, and H's. So
Mhm,
for everybody who's listening to this via audio, so there's relationships that are a T shape, right, where the one partner is on top of the other partner. So imagine on that T alphabet T, if you took that bottom of the T out, the top of the T would fall down and the whole thing would collapse. And there's a lot of relationships that are set up that way, where one person basically runs the show and the other person's just kind of around for the ride. Then there's A's, right? So picture the letter A, capital letter A. So they're now leaning on each other. So, okay, this is a little bit healthier here. There's, one partner, if they pulled away, the other partner would fall down. If the other partner pulled away, then the other partner would
mhm,
fall down, right? So there's some cohesiveness here, and both people are bringing together something. But regardless, you still pull one side out and the whole thing collapses. And it's funny, I think a lot of people see A's as historically have seen it as a healthy relationship. But again, how healthy is it when you yank one side and there's total collapse of is
mhm.
that really is that the healthiest way to live? Or there's H's, right? And so picture the capital letter H, right? There's an independent party thriving who knows who they are and loves who they are. Over here, there's another independent party who knows who they are and loves who they are. And then there's this connection between them making the letter H. And it's just the connection's as simple as marriage. Hey, we're going to do this amazing life together, and together we will have an enhanced my life it's gotten better with the addition of you, and your life got better with the addition of me.
Mhm.
And I also know that you don't need me, and I have the peace knowing that I don't need you. That is a new idea of relationship. I think there are still a lot of people who that scares them. I'm not sure why it scares them. Maybe you can speak to that. But I think I think to your point, a lot of this is history and culture teeing us up for relationships to kind of not go well, and then surprise, surprise, infidelity happens, and then it really doesn't go well, and we can't even find a way to get out. I don't know if you've heard of those letter analogies before. I'm sure you have. Speak to your spin on that, because I do think to recover from this, I think any sort of dependency that the betrayed partner has on her husband it causes a ton of problems. You're trying to rely on somebody who has proven to be temporarily unreliable. That's a mess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think, but when we get beyond, we have to stay together, or I need you for whatever reason, or, for the male, I need you to take care of the kids and make all of this other stuff that is part of my appearance. I need you to help that function and go along and look good. We get in the way because we need each other. We get in the way of choosing each other. We might have chosen each other in the beginning. Most people chose each other in the beginning. But then we kind of devolve almost into these arranged marriages. And nobody's choosing anybody in that situation, right? We're doing what needs to be done. And so, yeah, I can see where infidelity starts to come in, because we're searching for some novelty. Both people are. They're looking for something that's out of the normal routine of the day in, day out of their life, because that's not very exciting. And now I think we can, like, when we start to do that internal work and we are recovering that authentic self that we lost a long time ago, or we lost parts of, maybe we didn't lose all of it, but we lost parts of it. And we start to reclaim it, and it starts to show up and drive things instead of the ego driving things or fear driving things, or this need for something for this person. I need you because I'm financially dependent or whatever. When we start to move away from those things that are in the couples together, now we have to have two individuals, like the H. And her being her authentic self calls you out to be your authentic self. And likewise, you call her out to be herself. And nobody's going to do it perfectly, but we can start to remind each other, like, hey, what are you doing? You're strong, you're smart. Like, come on, I know you can do this. Why are you falling apart? Or why, again, this is not early in recovery. You would not say to a partner, why are you falling apart? Right? Their whole life just got turned upside down, and they were betrayed by somebody that they love. But down the road, couples start to find that language in a way that they can joke with each other, but also call each other into who they are and who we've grown to be. And I also say at that point, because I think when we are pursuing things external to us, whatever that is, there's always going to be an edge to that. At some point, there's only so many women to sleep with before you still wake up the next day and you're like, I still am kind of feeling empty. That didn't quite make me feel good enough. Maybe I'll go pursue the praise of other men, right? But at some point, you're like, it's not quite working. That's usually when I start to see people, if they haven't come in because their relationship blew up because of a disclosure. But when we're looking at who that self is and growing that, and that evolves every year in one way or another, that's endless novelty. And that in a relationship where there's also that security, because we are choosing each other, even after all the shit we've been through. Can I say that?
Yep.
Okay. Even after all the shit we've been through, at the end of this, we chose each other. And That's some powerful stuff. That's some security and some safety that is reestablished. And we have a formula for ongoing novelty.
What you said is, and this is a sensitive topic, and I'd love, you're probably, well, I don't know, we're both really direct. Maybe we'll both butcher it. We'll try to censor each other and make that. But what you're hitting on a topic that everyone's scared to talk about. And my wife and I got to a point where we were able to talk about it. And finally, she wasn't taking offense to it. So for the men listening to this, just so you know, I did not really breach this topic of discussion with my wife until we were 2 years in. So if you are listening to this and you are thinking about breaching this topic of discussion and you are not, and you are not at least a year and probably closer to 2 years in, I would highly recommend not bringing this up. This is something you could talk to your therapist or your couples therapist about, but this is not a living room, a bedroom conversation. This is something to do with a mediator. So, but Jackie, we need to talk to it because it's the truth. It really is the truth. As humans, we create realities. And as you can imagine, when you cheat on your wife, she's going to create a reality where you are a liar. You have the capability of lying to someone that you love most. You have the capability of lying and having her not know that you're lying. Right. So think about this. This is all resting in her reality. She might have the idea that you aren't very attracted to her anymore, that she has become boring. Maybe she's too old, she's too fat, she's too wrinkly, that you're into younger women, anyways, my point is she is going to have a reality full of the stuff that I just said. And that's not uncommon. I would say that most women listening to this are like, yep. And so I'm bringing this up to say, she is now going to have to be with you with that reality that she's living with. But Jackie, there's other few things that we need to call out, which is there's other beliefs that she's going to have, which is any guy who could do this to me is a blank. Guys who look at porn are a blank, right? And so if you have these beliefs, I don't know if you can. I don't think your relationship can. I think the beliefs need to be changed, or your relationship you'll hit these plateaus. I mean, because think about it. If you believe that every guy who does this is inconsiderate and doesn't think women are equal, they think less of women. They don't respect women. They objectify women. He's going to be checking out your sister. He's going to be checking out your daughter's friends, right? Like, so if that is what you think this guy is, Jackie, come on. You can't have a thriving marriage if that's what you think. And so
the successful outcome would be to end that marriage.
Yeah, correct.
Keep your sister safe, keep your daughter safe.
Correct.
And move away from that, right?
Yes, and Jackie, you're hitting on the thing that this needs to be discussed. And here's the reason I think people want to shy away from it is a lot of these ladies, Jackie, don't want to change their belief system. They want guys who look at porn to be that. They want cheaters to be men like that. And so it's really hard for them to I don't want to soften that belief. Like guys who do that, they are that. And guys who look at porn, they are. And so, but again, here's the challenge. Ladies, you're married to a guy who did that. So you have to face the facts. Is he not one of those guys or is he? And if he is, do you really think you're going to be able to have a thriving marriage under that new belief system? If he is one of those men and those men are this, come on. Why? And that is one thing, Jackie, that drives me crazy in this field is why aren't we speaking to that? If the significance of these behaviors equals that, do you really think you're going to be able to have a thriving marriage if that's the significance of what he's done? And I have my belief as to why people don't hit this. I think it's an uncomfortable conversation. I think women do not want to be asked to change the significance of this because they are pissed and they disagree with all of it. And so to asking them to kind of soften their belief system is why? I don't want to change my belief system. This is messed up that guys do this. I agree with all of that. And isn't there mountains of evidence to suggest that the guys doing this are not sickos, perverts, hate women, hate that, don't we have enough evidence to suggest that your husband actually doesn't fall into that category? Are you following what I'm saying, Jackie? Is there any fallacy to what I'm hitting at? Because I really do like we kept hitting these things. And I kept telling my wife, I'm like, honey, if you think that I did that for those reasons, I don't know if we're going to be able to have a
exist. They're out there and they do tend to get married. But you are right that that's going to be a hard marriage to thrive in as the female counterpart.
Mhm.
And sometimes I see these partners in their second marriage and they're coming in with a sex addiction partner. And they're like, my first partner was, now this one. And I'm like, yeah, we might need to look at some things here because this is starting to be a pattern. And maybe while this new husband may seriously and genuinely seem like he wants to do work and put in the effort and wants to have a thriving marriage, your last one didn't. And so we're going to have to do some of the healing from that one that didn't get done in this relationship as well while we're healing this relationship. But you're going to have to be learning to separate what's from my previous marriage and what's from this marriage.
I see. Now I see where you're going. So similarly, if we apply it, so let's say this is your first marriage, and let's say your partner did cheat on you in a compulsive, addictive way. The same thing kind of applies. Is like, are you? Let's say you didn't have a previous marriage, but you can apply the stuff you've seen on TV, right? Once a cheater, always a cheater. Oftentimes men like, because that's the challenge I think for men is cheaters are depicted as guys who didn't have the guts to break up and were just trying to find the next backup plan to trade over to, or they're just seen as total inconsiderate objectification a-holes, right?
Right.
I don't know. My program's full of men and neither of them fall into either of those. They're normal guys obsessed with their wives, want nothing more than to be with their wife forever. They're heartbroken at the idea that the family could have been broken up. I mean, I'm surrounded by the beauty of these driven men. And my program's no joke. It is as intense gets. I mean, we have in-person retreats that we're doing. They are connecting with the group in the deepest of way possible. I see committed guys. But Jackie, again, their partner's seeing a very different story. How do we breach this discussion? Because I mean, guys, here's the thing. Guys can't bring it up. If guys say, hey, your reality needs to change, that is not going to be welcomed very, very well. So what do we do as a couple? Because I mean, Jackie, the truth is her reality does need to change if you guys are going to have a good relationship, but the guy can't bring it up. So, I mean, we're kind of like in this crappy spot of like, he caused the problem and now her reality does have some beliefs about him that are going to prevent them from having a great marriage. But again, what do we do? I mean, it's off limits for the guy to bring it up because he's the one who caused all of this. How does a couple handle that?
I mean, the way we would handle it from our end, and then I'll talk about the couple. So we do some non-conventional things in our therapy clinic. So often, like each person has their own individual therapist, but we also get release assigned. So whoever I'm working with, the addict or the partner, I'm going to be hearing this from them, and I'm going to be talking about it to my colleague, and they're going to be like, "Ah, yeah, I can see that." And so we're going to try to get that to be brought up in an individual session. We're going to try to flush, or not individual. We're going to try to flush that out in a couple session. And sometimes I may be the one bringing it up because he's like, no, I cannot do it. And I'm like, I'll do it. And usually I'll just say, often for women, there is this belief. And they were supposed to marry Prince Charming. And Prince Charming was never supposed to hurt them ever because he's charming and he's a prince. And what do we do when Prince Charming gets off the horse and steps on you? And so we have to talk about those beliefs, the beliefs underneath all of this that get in the way of doing relational repair, doing relational work so that you guys can be successful. So we'll bring that up if that's coming out. And we do the individual. I mean, that's one of the reasons is you're going to hear different things in our individual sessions that we know need to be addressed in couple sessions, in those relational sessions. So we'll bring it up that way. For the couple, I think sometimes for the partner, if they're seeing and he's talking about beliefs he is having to challenge and where those came from and how they were not serving, I think it's fair to say, have you ever thought about the beliefs you got that you weren't aware you got? And she may be like, no, my beliefs are fine. But at some point, I mean, hopefully, because I've also seen some partners who refuse to do any work.
Mhm.
That's also going to make it hard to repair a relationship and make it one that thrives.
Mhm.
So, most of the time, I would say those are the exceptions or those are the outliers. Most of the time, the couples that we're working with, she is going to start to get curious, even if she denies it initially. She may bring it up with her therapist and be like, my husband asked me this weird question. And would I have beliefs that I need to challenge? I mean, every therapist is going to be like, oh, I love this question.
Yeah, but you see how delicate it is, because
Hmm.
I mean, what we're asking these women to do is change a belief that culturally everyone subscribes to, right? Like,
Hmm.
there is the concept of, oh my gosh, if he's going to two-time you and be with another woman, yeah, get out. And
Hmm.
so, I think it is really tough, because as much as she has bought into the sex addiction field, she's understanding that guys can be sexually compulsive. She's understanding that this is actually not as uncommon as unfortunately it should be. So she's buying in, but I do think that this is a big hangup. Is we are
Hmm.
asking these women to change a belief from, I could forgive a guy who slept with another woman. Like, I could be married to him, and I could understand that he could do that, and that it would have nothing to do with me or our family, or his character, Jackie. Like, because that's
Hmm.
the other thing
Yes.
is, you'll hear all sorts of people say that this speaks to your character. Again, I gotta disagree. The guys in my groups, this does not speak to their character at all. This is
Hmm.
some weird compulsive thing that is happening because of a long chain of societal influences, parental influences, childhood experiences, to being exposed to things at ages that they shouldn't have been exposed to. I see, to me, I don't think this is a reflection of their character. I think this is a reflection of their belief system, which is largely influenced by their society, their church, their parents,
Hmm.
and whatever else. And now this behavior is spitting out at the end. But to me, I think to jump to the conclusion that this is a reflection of who your husband is dangerous, because I wonder what's going to happen to you too then, if that's the case, right? Because I mean, essentially what you're
Right.
saying is, I'm going to stay with an a-hole who kind of sucks and lies. And I don't know, man. Can you have a good
Right.
marriage if that's what your decision is?
Yeah. And that's where, like, sometimes I've said to clients, like, if you have this set of beliefs about males and you're telling me you're heterosexual, now what? Like, now what are you going to do? Because, like, that does not work.
Mhm.
And so we might need to start challenging these beliefs that we just were fed and we assumed that they were true.
Mhm.
Like, no doubt you believe that this is true and you believe this has something to do with character. I might say to them, like, I'm never going to hold anybody accountable for behaviors that come because of whatever reasons. Usually at this point, I kind of have some ideas. And so I'm saying, because of childhood issues, messages they get around masculinity, all of these things that land them here, like, this person's coming, they're trying to do the work, they're making some improvements. You've reported that to me. And so, like, we might need to challenge these beliefs that he was given, that you were given, and figure out, what do you believe?
Well, and it's the challenge I think that I see with when we inject faith based approaches into mental health. To me, again, this is not I mean, I'm not telling anybody can believe whatever they want to believe for their faith. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just thinking, when we start combining that with mental health, especially recovery from something compulsive,
Mhm.
we're taking like idealistic purity kind of standards and mushing it up against flawed human beings who are incredibly complex and make mistakes every 2 minutes, right? So I
Mhm.
think the challenge is, we're taking this standard that, because to me, I've seen it go both ways. There's either this kind of purity culture of, oh my gosh, the devil's living inside of this person, and then that backfires, because now the poor guy feels like he is, something's horribly wrong with him, and then he's, going to burn in a fiery inferno in the afterlife. But then I've also seen it go the other way. I've seen it like, um, oh, everything's okay, I'm just going to pray this whole thing away and all is going to be well. And I think we can't pray away a belief system that we're unaware of having. And so, I think that's the challenge with how big this is anytime we're going to just believe something and slap a label on it and call it that without any other levels of curiosity around how this actually came about and why this is so common. I mean, I heard a number yesterday that said, while only 18% of men fall into a addictive or compulsive category, I saw a number that said 68% of men engage in deceptive sexual practices, meaning they are concealing something about their sexuality from their partner. 68. So pretty much you have a really high likelihood of someone not completely telling you about their sexuality. I think it's naive to say that people are the problem. I think if we're seeing the numbers climb at this rapid of a rate so quickly, just in the last 30 years, I think we have to wonder, come on, I mean, doesn't the internet and social media have to do with this? And then if that's the case, how flawed are these men? And is it the container that we're placing these men in that needs to be addressed? And I think, again, I think that's a difficult topic to breach too, because I think women see that as an escape or an out or a way to shift blame. I can see where they would say that. I don't share that same belief, but again, I'm coming from a cheater and an addict standpoint. So, do I like the idea that I can shift the cause of this off of me onto somebody else? So I get that, am I a little biased? But I think, Jackie, that's kind of the challenge with looking at this as this person did this thing and ignoring the plethora, in my opinion, of factors that would make someone engage in some sort of deceptive or compulsive sexual practice. To me, I don't know. There's a lot of indicators to me that perfectly explain why this is happening, and the flaws in these individuals' characters aren't necessarily one of those things. Now, are there flaws? Sure, but I think if we're comparing the factors of what drove this, I have never met a young man who couldn't wait to dehumanize himself and dehumanize others. I think that happens over time.
Well, and it usually starts with a disconnection from self. And so, I mean, I think this gets into some of the conversations you have to have with couples and individuals about healthy sexuality. And, I'm never going to define for another person what healthy sexuality looks like. But I have sat in a lot of conversations as the two are talking about this, and we're trying to flush it out and we're trying to figure some things out. And initially, they're going to practice. And I will say it might be awkward at first. Let's not rule it out because it got awkward just because we're taking it to a more vulnerable level than maybe we have in the past. And that may feel awkward. Sex can be very vulnerable. And for a lot of people, they will avoid that at any price, right? They want to see, this is Brene Brown's work. We're very attracted to vulnerability in another person, but we don't want to have other people see our vulnerability. And so how do we have that sexual experience together with vulnerability? And, I'll throw that question out to couples and say, what does that look like for you guys? Let's talk about that. And, we typically have the two therapists in the room that we're trying to help facilitate. We've heard some things in individual that we're trying to also bring into the conversation. And, that's a process for them to figure out. And not a lot of them are figuring that out before marriage.
Well, and that right there is, and that's kind of how I'm going to have both of us kind of take our last jab at some advice for this. But that was about to come out of my mouth, what you just said, which was, if we're going to wrap this podcast up and give you guys something to think about as individuals and couples, I think that's what you just said there. That's what I would speak to. Is I know there's a lot of people pointing a lot of fingers at parents and trauma and all sorts of stuff. And I think I don't think we can point one finger at anybody. I think it's the accumulation of all of the factors. Yes, did your parents beat you, or did they just tell you to go to Harvard Medical School? Both are trauma. They need to stay out of your business and let you become your parents' job are supposed to be and the community's job should be raising you to be the best you. and then you be you, and maybe find a partner that enhances you. But if you don't, maybe just don't find a partner or a monogamous partner in the traditional sense, right? I think that's where I think everything's kind of gotten screwed up, is we're forcing humans into containers that I don't know humans were ever supposed to be in. I mean, we're shoving them into homes and locking their doors and then saying you and your family have to figure this out without the support. And, we don't tribally stick together anymore. You are on your own in your own little home. I think we are in relationships that are very challenging because the constraints on the coupleship and the family unit is incredibly hard. And I don't think there's a ton of time. And to your point, I don't think we're asking a lot of questions that we should have asked before we brought kids into this world, because now here we are tied to each other for life to a degree, to some extent. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of conversations that we did not have about pornography use and, how important is it to you that couples preserve the sexual energy for each other? Because like I said, that I would say women value that more than men. If they, and I don't think men mean that. I think they've just been kind of groomed to not really think sex is that big of a deal because we're just bombarded with the sexual female image constantly, that we grow up not thinking, oh, I can't wait to preserve this for my wife and I. We're drinking it in for 20 years before we get married. Right. And so,
right.
Now we're supposed to just turn it off. Right. But these are things that need to be discussed. And I think that's my advice to all these couples. And the whole purpose of me bringing Jackie on today was, I think together as a couple, if you're going to thrive through this, or even as a guy, if you're not married and you just want to become sober and free from all of this, I think you need to appreciate how dynamic and big this is. There are so many stones that you are going to have to turn over and make sure there's nothing under there that's causing this. I mean, it is a big project. It is something you will be doing for longer than the 2 to 5 years. It is something you'll be doing for the rest of your life. And kind of what Jackie said, it's fun. I mean, my recovery groups, these guys love it. Like, that's why I call it a recovery mastermind, is these guys are with they're with 10 of their peers. They're with the same 10 guys for a year or 2 or 3. And these guys are turning stones over together as fast as possible. It's like, hey guys, how do we believe beliefs that we want to believe, not the ones that others forced us to believe, right? How do we pioneer this? And that's how I kind of want to end my portion. I'll have Jackie speak to her advice to you guys. What I would say is, let go of this purity crap, these ideals. Let go of that. If you guys are trying to thrive as a couple, let go of that. Instead, take a different approach. My wife and I wear this like a badge. We have a very different outlook. We know that we are living in a society that claims to value monogamy on one hand, and then literally doesn't even look like they value it whatsoever in every other. We know that we're living in a hypersexual culture. We know that women are playing into looking like a trophy to be conquered, and that men are wanting to conquer them, and that both parties are participating in this nonsense. Like, my wife and I are wearing it like a badge. We understand we've gotten to ourselves as culture into a bit of a pickle here with trying to not do all of this stuff. And every day is 3 steps back. Okay. So if you guys are listening to this, if you're not taking at least 3 steps forward, if not 4 or 5, then you are slipping probably back into this, because culturally they're not doing you any favors. So that's what I would say is, let go of ideals and purity and all that stuff, because the truth is humans are complex. They're being stimulated all the time by things, and it's convincing them to act in ways that they probably wouldn't have acted had this outside influence not convinced them to. So that's what I say is, team up as a couple and understand you guys are fighting a really difficult battle. I know the sex addiction field makes it look like it's just your husband's fault for being a sicko. Guys, that's not what's going on. We live in, I turn on the TV and I'm like, how is it only 18% of men that are sex addicts? I think that number is absurdly low. I don't believe that for a second. Well, let me rephrase that. They may not be addicts. How many of them are violating their values and morals by doing sexual things that they've come to believe is okay? So that's what I would say is, single guys, wear this like a badge. Couples, wear this like a badge. You guys are pioneering for the first time, couples standing up against this. And this has never been stood up against. We have just been becoming progressively more and more promiscuous and sexual and open as time goes on. What you guys are doing is saying, hey, are we heading in a good direction? That's what this badge is. So I would convert it from this sad thing and say, all right, hey, let's go to war with this stuff that is really destroying humanity, and if we let it keep going unpoliced. So anyways, went on a little rant there, but
Yeah.
Jackie, what would you leave addicts and couples with this podcast of honoring the size of this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes they know the size of the problem. Like the partner knows it, she feels it in her body, or she did at one point, and you can have her recall that. Like, look, if this was an easy fix, would those emotions be valid? The level you felt that pain, would that be valid if this was a quick fix? Or if this was just about you losing 10 pounds? Like, this is not about that. And I think it has so much to do with societal messaging. And, there's research going back that talks about for baby boys, right? We're holding an infant. And if we perceive it as a boy, we gaze at that baby seconds less than we will if it's a girl.
Mm.
That's heartbreaking. Why? Unless we think that's a baby. They have put that baby in boy clothes, girl clothes. It's the same baby, and it's the person gazing at the baby who is applying a bias.
Mm.
I'll use the example all the time. Like a little, we have an 18-month-old. They've mastered walking. They're kind of figuring out running. They're running down the sidewalk. They fall. They hurt they could start to cry. What do we say if it's a little girl?
Mm-hmm.
And what do we say if it's a little boy? And most people give you different answers. And I'm like, right, we all know it. What we are saying to boys is, you're fine. Jump up. You're tough. We're not saying, come here, invite them into relationship. We're not saying that. We're saying that to little girls. Oh, come here. Let me give you a kiss. Let me give you a hug, as though that makes their skin knee better. It doesn't, right? But that's the messaging we are saying to boys is, you're good on your own. You don't need anybody. And that's happening at very young ages. And so, yeah, sometimes I will say that to partners and be like, I know it's hard to imagine being a male, but put yourself in their shoes for a minute. And don't think of all the good things you think about males. Think about your spouse and these messages that they started getting at very young ages. Can you have some empathy for why they landed here? Of course they landed here. And, sometimes we have some details to that story, and their addicted spouse has made sense to them or started to make sense of why I landed in sex addiction or whatever they're calling it. I'm not going to fight over language, whatever they're calling it. And the partner can be like, well, I don't like it. And I'm like, okay, but can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see why they would land here? And usually they'll be honest and say, yeah, I get it. I get it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're working with. That is what we are working with. And that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find, I've gotten texts on a Saturday night like, Jackie, I just had this type of sex that I've never had before. Remind me to bring it up to you on Wednesday. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the heads up. Let me know. And then when we start talking about it, there's some vulnerability there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some connection there that they've never experienced with sex. And they're just like, what was this? Because like that, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems satisfying to me. That actually seems fulfilling, right? They were vulnerable. The other person was vulnerable. It was a moment. Not that that's the only type of sex we can have, but I think it is important to have
Mm-hmm.
that type of sex. And I find when men have that, at least they'll talk to me about it. They're like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get more of this? What happened? What was different? But I think also, because I do men's groups as well. And when they are getting to know each other and they're in a room talking with each other, first of all, amazing things happen in these men's groups. And I feel very privileged. Sometimes they'll call it like the men's group and Jackie. And I'm like, right, thank you for letting me participate. But when they start connecting with each other on a real level, not on the competitive or you're my next mark and I'm trying to pass you up, right? Not in that way. And there's a genuine connection and they are speaking to each other in that place. This praise of the world doesn't really compete with that.
Mhm.
At least that's what they tell me, right?
Mhm.
And they are saying, this is what I've been yearning for.
Mhm.
This is what I was always looking for and didn't have for whatever reason. That's what they're looking for. And that's not the messaging we're offering to men. It's usually, I mean, we are offering it to women, but then if they're heterosexual, they're just going to be without
Mhm.
that in a relationship. That's not going to work. So we have to start challenging these messages that get in the way of you having the marriage you want and start like envisioning what beliefs do we need to have this type of relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, you said something that's so true. The guys, so one of the things that's on my website, and it offends some wives, is I say recovery needs to be fun. And she's like, hey, I saw a picture and the guys were playing cornhole at your retreat. Like, and they get mad that these guys are hanging out with their brothers in recovery and they're having fun. And my response back is, I get that. I get the perspective because you're not having fun. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, now here is this whole ugly thing, and, and they're enjoying recovery. But here's my response to it is just what you said. I really believe, I heard somebody on Rob Wise's podcast who said this exact same thing. He goes, I don't know. And it was so true when he said it. He goes, I don't know if guys can actually truly achieve long-term recovery unless they have a killer connected recovery group. He's like, I don't think you can just do this in 1 hour sessions weekly. He's like, I'm not sure that's, while important, I don't think it's enough. I think they really need a killer ride or die support group. And it's funny, to your point, I don't think it has that much to do with sobriety and recovery. I think it has to do with this group of guys is the thing. This is why I wanted the millions of dollars. This is why I wanted the novel sexual. Like, I wanted to experience something meaningful like this. And then, yeah, they get that. And it's like, they're poof, magically sober. And it's funny. It's like, we didn't really do anything other than give them something that was, absent from their existence and before. And it's always hard for guys to, and I think here's the biggest challenge, at least that I see, is these guys have never experienced it. And so when I tell them, oh yeah, my group will give you this, they're like, they don't even know if they want it. Cause they're like, oh, that sounds fine, but what's that have to do with recovery, right? They want the 15 steps to get sober. They want the workbook, volume 1, 2, and 3. It's like, oh no, Roland, give me something that's going to get me sober. And it's like time and time again, it's just like they get in the group, they have this ride or die group of guys they're in with recovery, and then all of a sudden, like, it's like, addict thoughts are gone. And it makes you wonder, right? What's actually going on from all of this? Is this really a sex and porn addiction, or is there something else going on here with men? I mean, guys, these are not small numbers. When you look at the numbers of the men being affected, I don't know how much this is a sex and porn addiction as how much this is have we put these poor guys in this environment that has really just created this bizarre existence where they're acting in ways that they're totally ashamed of. Jackie, how do people get a hold of you? How do they participate in some of these offerings? Where are you located? Give us the information so somebody can find you.
So I am located in Utah, and I own a therapy practice, and we focus on betrayal trauma, sex addiction, infidelity, all those fun things that are deal breakers at dinner conversations. That's what my husband says. I have a podcast as well. It's called Thanks for Sharing. I have a website. I do online workshops. I just started one yesterday on attachment. We're just going to kind of focus on attachment. We've got 3 men, 3 women, which I love, kind of keeping it kind of small, and them, from different states and everything coming together. And we're just going to focus 8 weeks on attachment, give some practical skills, some practical tools for them to start implementing while we're doing the workshop.
Yep.
I have another one starting next month on breaking the cycle of relapse. Sometimes we have to have a targeted, like, let's figure out why we can't get past 3 months. Let's figure out what that is. And to me, anytime we can work something in a group and you're not just on your own to figure it out or individually, I just think it's it's a different way of working, and I think it's a powerful way of working.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't feel so overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
with all the things that have to be worked on and changed.
Mm-hmm. It is. I will second that. My wife and I were in a recovery group together, very expensive recovery group. I think it was like 30 grand, I think it was, but it's the only reason we're married. I mean, Miji, doing this alone it's stupid. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're trying to do this alone or dragging your feet and doing this slow, I mean, gosh, every day you try to do this alone, and every day that you're not in maximum action with this, yeah, I mean, you're really harming the long-term livelihood of this kind of going where it needs to go. Cause you will get burned out. Everybody does. And, the only way that you will avoid that is if you've made a ton of progress. Cause if you're burning out and you haven't moved the needle a lot, oh boy, you're in for a really rough emotional state in a really low time. And as a couple, that can be extra hard to get out of. So I empathize with the couples who've made it to that point, because it's a mess. Jackie, this was so awesome. Like I said, I don't care if you don't want to come back on. I am forcing you back on here in 5 months to do this again. I know my audience, they're going to love this. It's just, they want the real stuff. They want to hear they want to know that this is hard because it is hard, not because they're screwing it up. And I think sometimes we don't speak to how big and ugly this thing is. So I so appreciate you coming on. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to talk with you.